extreme and excruciating hardships that the Akufo-Addo government has foisted on them. Rightly so, the Vice President has purported to respond to some of the issues raised. But there's one response that I was looking forward to that has not been forthcoming. You know, recently there's been some debate about the refusal of the authorities at Wesley Girls High School to allow a female student perform one of the most important and crucial tenets of the Islamic faith, which is Ramadan. There has been a back and forth over the matter. Several people have expressed opinions. There have been some very, very disagreeable statements made about some leaders within the Christian fraternity. But one person who has gone into hiding over the matter is Dr. Bawumia. He is the most prominent Islamic figure or Muslim figure we have in this country. Not just that, he is the #2 man in government. He possesses sufficient influence to ensure that the right thing is done by this young lady. And yet, because of political convenience and his desire to be politically correct, he has allowed such injustice to be perpetrated all this while, and he has gone completely silent over the matter. At a time when some of us who are actually Christians have been at the forefront of demanding that the girls' religious rights ought to be respected by the school. This is a man who has postured as somebody who has the interest of the Islamic community at heart. It appears, however, that his interest in that ends with photo opportunities with the chief imam, where he is seen bowing so low such that even his forehead touches the floor. That is where his commitment to the religion appears to end. Beyond that, he will not intervene when clear injustice and wrongdoing is being perpetrated against members of the faith. In this particular instance, the Constitution of Ghana is on his side. Education is a strictly regulated activity. Both private and public institutions come under regulation. All of them are bound by the stipulation of the Constitution. And to the extent that Wesley Girls is a publicly funded institution, they cannot deny any student his or her fundamental religious rights. To the extent that that right does not in any way undermine discipline in the school. And I don't see how the performance of a 30-day fasting ritual, which in any event lasts for only a certain period within the day, can undermine discipline in the school to warrant the sort of unfair action that has been taken against this girl. The Vice President has gone silent. And yet, in the run-up to the 2016 election, he was so loud about his desire to champion the concerns of the Muslim community. And yet, when it mattered most, he abdicated completely from responsibility because he is counting on votes. Such spineless leadership is completely undesirable. And for somebody who wants to throw in his hat in the 2024 contest, this kind of unprincipled conduct is completely undesirable. It is not something that bodes well for leadership. When you are a leader, you don't only affiliate with convenience. You do what has to be done, especially when members of society are repressed by a powerful interest. So he should come out of hiding on this particular matter and let everybody know where he stands on the matter. I am clear about where I stand. I think that that girl must have the right to perform Ramadan in compliance with constitutional dictates that guarantees everybody the right to worship. Where does Dr. Bawumia stand on that matter? And I know for a fact that he has avoided it because he believes it's not politically convenient. These are not the qualities of a leader. If this is a sort of leadership that he hopes to present to this country, then it is a non-starter. There's no way that this country can move forward with this kind of unprincipled and spineless leadership. So I await a response in that particular regard. Now let us come to his response to the concerns raised by the teeming masses of Ghanaian youth on social media. You see, I think that it will not be an exaggeration at all to state that Dr. Bawumia is by far and away the most discredited politician in Ghana today. If there's any one person or political leader whose words nobody believes anymore, it will be Dr. Bawumia. And this is purely self-inflicted, because everybody remembers his lofty rhetoric and sometimes hubristic posturing about the management of the economy in the run-up to the 2016 election, where he postured as a be-all and end-all of economic knowledge, where he styled himself as some kind of messianic economist under whose leadership this country will see rapid progress economically and an enhancement in the well-being of the ordinary Ghanaian. Now, after all that lofty rhetoric had been rewarded with political power, and he had become the head of the economic management team, he has supervised the most catastrophic economic situation in the near 30 years of the Fourth Republic, said that the hardships that Ghanaians are going through now are completely unprecedented. Never happened in our history. The very things that he said should not be done are the very things that he is supervising. He is on record, and everybody knows that he's become the butt of all jokes. He has become the pivot around which all manner of memes are flying. People simply dig up what he said in the past and contrast it with what is happening today and come to the conclusion that he cannot be trusted, that no truth emanates from him. Because this is a man who said that the previous government, which I was a member of, had reduced governance to borrowing and taxation, which would then suggest that if he has opportunity to head the economic management team as vice president, borrowing and taxation will be reduced to the barest minimum. Indeed, he is on record as having said also that excessive taxation hurts an economy, which stands to reason that if he has opportunity, taxation will be the last resort to mobilizing resources to plug whatever financial holes may exist within the state coffers. And yet in government he has done the exact opposite. Now when young Ghanaians who had it to their neck in terms of economic hardships started to voice concern on social media, the initial reaction of the Akufo-Addo-Bawumia administration was to deploy their social media tags to go after them and use all manner of unprintable language on them. They came up with ridiculous counter hashtags that people should fix themselves. Exactly how can I fix myself such that I don't pay more at the pump? So now, what can you do to yourself so that you don't have to pay more in VAT when you go and buy a bottle of water? And yet they were asking us to fix ourselves. It is not clear exactly what they meant. MPs even joined the fray to mock those and attack those who were demanding that something be done about the repressive economic environment. Now, when they realized that that had fallen flat and that it was eliciting more condemnation from the generality of the Ghanaian public, they quickly changed tact and offered what they believed would be a more conciliatory approach to addressing the concerns that had been raised. So, in that regard, the vice president purported to put out what he says is evidence of work being done to address the concerns of the ordinary Ghanaian. Except that the list of 70 items he put out do not even begin to address the issues that are being raised. Now, what is the issue that is being raised? The issue is that this government, through some fiscal measures, or bluntly speaking, taxation, has ensured an astronomical increase in the cost of living, which is making it almost impossible for people to eke out a normal living. And therefore, something needed to be done about it. This was the crux of the concerns that were being raised by people on social media. So any response to that must go to the heart of the concern that is being raised. But these 70 items that Dr. Bawumia lists don't even begin to tackle the problem. Now, it is also important that when you come to do an analysis of what is being said, you track back and look at what is causing the problem to begin with. And the reason why taxes have been raised and we are having all these economic difficulties boils down to two things. And they are contained in the budget statement read by the government itself about a month or two ago. The first one is that because we were going for elections in 2020 and the Bawumia Akufo-Addo government prioritized winning over anything else, they decided to embark on reckless expenditure. Basically spend money we did not have as a country in order to buy votes to win elections. That kind of behavior has led to the biggest budget deficit in the history of the Fourth Republic, 16% of GDP. It means that when you compare our expenditure to our revenue for 2020, we spend far more than we earned, such that if you calculate it, it is 16% of our GDP. So there's a huge hole in government's finance. We have spent money that we did not have. So any money we get going forward, we must address that gap before we are even able to spend more. The second issue is that because we needed to spend more than we earned, we went on a borrowing spree, such that today we have the worst debt position in the entire history of the Fourth Republic, and perhaps one of the worst in the history of Ghana. Now, Mr. Pratt and Co were around during that champion era when Yentua became the sing song. But we are practically in the same situation now. Our debt to GDP ratio is 76%. It means that if you take the entire GDP of Ghana, all economic activity happening here put together, 76.1% of it is equivalent to our debt. That's how much we owe. In absolute terms, it is 300 billion Ghana cedis. That also means that we have to service that debt. In other words, pay interest, not even principal payment, interest. Now, to pay interest alone, we have to use 35 billion Ghana cedis this year to service it. And so now, you have to look at the fact that if you look at the budget statement read by this government, they say that they project to get about 72 billion Ghana cedis in revenue. Now, 35 billion is about half of that amount. That amount will be used to service interest, to pay interest alone on the debt that we owe. When you take out public sector wages, which you cannot touch, and statutory payments, almost all the money vanishes. So it is because of these two, the deficit and the extraordinarily large public debt we have, under the supervision of Dr. Bawumia as head of the economic management team, that they have had to raise taxes in order to mobilize revenue to be able to do the normal things that they need to do as a government. This is in sharp contrast with what Dr. Bawumia told us when they were in opposition. He said taxation and borrowing were the lazy man's approach to economic management, and that the Mahama administration had reduced governance to taxation and borrowing. When they came to power, in typical propaganda fashion, they purported to have reduced or abolished about 15 taxes. Now, that is even not true. What they have done was that what they did was remove VAT or reduce VAT on about 15 different items. But in lieu of that, they have introduced about 12 different taxes. They increased VAT by 5%. They introduced a luxury car tax. They increased communication service tax by 50%. they extended the National Fiscal Stabilization Levy beyond the 2017 sunset clause, which makes it a new tax. There was one called the Special Import Levy. That one too, they extended it beyond the sunset clause, which makes it a new tax. They've introduced a COVID-19 levy. So now, for getting COVID, you are taxed on top. So you are actually taxed for falling sick. They've introduced a sanitation tax. They have increased ESLA by an average of 27%. They have increased NHIL by 1%. And a host of other taxes amounting to 12 separate taxes. And yet the promise was clear in 2016 that they were not going to burden the Ghanaian with taxes. So it is these taxes that have led to an increase in the price of goods and services, leading to a high cost of living in this country. So in order to address it convincingly, the Vice President ought to demonstrate in the claims he makes that there is a clear plan to fix the deficit and reduce our debt, because these are the things that will ease pressure on government so that they don't need to impose taxation. But now, the horizon looks very bleak. Our deficit, according to the IMF, for this year will be 13%. 13% is still higher than any other deficit incurred before the Bawumia Akufo-Addo administration got into power. In 2022, they expect it to be around 11%. Still very, very high. So in the next 3 to 4 years, there's not going to be any ease in the pressures leading to the introduction of these taxes. As I speak to you, unless we get debt relief, that means our debt is forgiven so that we don't have to pay interest on it. There's no way out of the melee. And in fact, what is worse is that very, very soon, this government will not even be able to borrow because our debt to GDP ratio has crossed unsustainable levels. So when they go to the international market to borrow, nobody will bother because everybody will know that we cannot pay the monies that we will borrow. He has not addressed these two issues in any substantive fashion. And therefore, his purported response cannot meet with the aspirations of the people. Now, let me examine a few of the claims that he makes to demonstrate that he has not even moved away from the same illogical propaganda that he used to dabble in when we were in opposition. And you will recall that some of us cautioned against a wholesale acceptance of the claims that he was making in opposition, because some of them were falsified theories. How does anybody stand on a platform and create the impression that a country like ours cannot rely on borrowing, or that taxation was necessarily inimical, without giving any thought to why they have to be done? Now, if you look at the list of items that he says constitute achievements of the Akufo-Addo government, in any event, he published 70. You will recall that 100 days into the Akufo-Addo government, he claimed that he had achieved 101 things. So, by some bizarre twist of fate, the achievements have reduced from 101 to 70 in 4 years. That alone should tell the people of Ghana the value we should place on this. Now, he makes some startling claims. Now, most of them center around what he calls digitization. Basically, public organizations automating or digitizing their services. So, for instance, if you want to apply for a license, you don't need to go to the licensing office yourself. Or if you want to apply for a passport, you do it online. Now, these are things that middle to low-level technocrats ought to be fronting, not a vice president. Because they are so mundane. In an era where there are countries launching satellites onto Mars and into outer space, our vice president is giggling and grinning over online application of passports. That to him is a be-all and end-all of economic management. So that if you do that, then you've done something great. So now, the fact that you can pay your electricity bill via mobile money, how does that benefit you when you go and stand at the pump to fill your tank? Where is the nexus in the two? So if people are complaining about high fuel prices and the vice president comes to tell us that you can you can pay your electricity bill via mobile money. Has he responded to the issue? When you go and buy this your water and it has increased by some margin, how does the fact that you can apply electronically to the passport office address your concern? So some of the things that he touts are things that high school students develop. Applications to ensure that some services are provided are things that elsewhere high school students are engaged in. Yet our vice president flaunts it as if it is some major significant achievement at a time when we are reeling under severe economic hardships. And he does not appear to have any prescriptions to address that problem. He makes another startling claim that until the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government came to power, there was no industrial policy to encourage setting up of factories. And that they are the ones who have come to implement one district, one factory, resulting in the establishment of 76 companies. Sena, to begin with, it is false that factories were not built before President Akufo-Addo and Vice President Bawumia came to power. Indeed, since time immemorial, since we gained independence, factories have always been built. Mr. Pratt is here. I'm sure if you give him opportunity, he can list for you a litany, a whole gamut of factories that President Nkrumah built. Today, we acknowledge President Nkrumah's vision, partly because of those factories. So, on what basis does Dr. Bawumia claim that before they came to power, no factories were built? And so now, that claim is patently false, even when you come to consider the Fourth Republic alone. Look, between these two books, this one is what we call Ghana, Rising Industrialization. It was published under the Mahama administration in 2016, November 2016, by the delivery unit headed by Dr. Valerie Sawyer. If you look into this book, we give account of 50 major factories set up under that government. If you put that aside, in the Green Book that we published in 2012, highlighting the achievements of Professor Mills, between pages 8 and 11, another 50 factories are provided. If you put this together, that is 100 factories for the 8 years that the NDC was in government. In addition to this, at least there are over 20 companies that they claim fall under this one district, one factory, that actually got their funding from government under the Mahama administration. 20. The list is here. Time may not permit me to go through all of them, but I can leave them with you. That is it. If you put this together, that is 120 factories. Indeed, it is the NDC administration that set up the biggest state factory in the history of Ghana, which is the Etuabo gas plant. The capital outlay for that was almost $1 billion. Today, their turnover per year is bigger than all the 76 factories that the NPP claims to have established put together. The Etuabo gas plant alone. As I speak to you, they are owed almost $700 million by VRA. That is more money than all the factories that Akufo-Addo claims to have built, which in any event are private initiatives that he merely piggybacked on over the last 4 years. Why? Was it not the same NDC government that actually put state resources into the Commander Sugar Factory? Were we not the ones who ensured that the Kumasi Shoe Factory was up and running? The Bupe butter processing plant, and many others that were built. President Akufo-Addo has not established a single state factory. The Elmina fish processing plant, which President Mahama built, President Akufo-Addo has not been able to replicate that. He does not have a single state factory to his name. Recently, his cousin, Gabriel Tredakon, has also made a startling claim that President Akufo-Addo has done more in terms of industrialization than President Nkrumah. It's a blatant falsehood. President Akufo-Addo and Dr. Bawumia have not built a single state factory. In other words, they have not put state money into building a single factory. All they have done is that they've approached people who already have factories or had begun plans to set up factories. In some instances, somebody was given as little as, is it $16,000 by way of tax waiver for the importation of some items. And it is classified as one district, one factory. Compare that to $1 billion pumped into the Tuabo gas processing plant. So the facts show that the claim by Dr. Bawumia that they have set up an industrial policy leading to factories that are unprecedented is patently untrue. They say, Mr. Bawumia says that before they came to power, there was no integrated aluminium industry for bauxite and iron ore resources, and that they have established the Ghana Integrated Aluminium Development Corporation. So now when you set up, you appoint a few people and put them in a room, an office space, and call them a name. Can you say that you've set up an integrated aluminium and bauxite industry when they have not mined 1 ounce of bauxite? So that claim to falls short of the facts. There's another staggering claim that he makes. He says that before they came to power, there was a freeze on public sector recruitment, and that they have recruited nurses, doctors, and other healthcare workers, teachers, police officers, and many others. And at least 750,000 public sector workers have been recruited in the last 4 years. This is another palpable untruth. First of all, it is not true that there was a freeze on public sector recruitment when the NDC was in power. It is not true. And let me take this opportunity to debunk it. Look, teachers alone, and here I will refer you to official Government of Ghana records. There is a document, a publication under the Ministry of Education called the Education Management Information System, EMIS. It is financed by our donor partners. It is one of the most reliable data sets that you can get in this country. The figures there show that within the 8 years of the NDC, close to 70,000 teachers were recruited. The Ghana Health Service, they are the ones who actually employ health workers, nurses, and doctors. They have a publication. They call it the Ghana Health Service Facts and Figures publication. They do it annually. If you check the 2018 edition, I think page 24, it tells you that it was President Mahama who did the biggest recruitment of nurses at a go in the history of the Fourth Republic. Between 2012 and 2013, over 40,000 nurses were employed. In fact, the first set of recruitments of nurses under the Akufo-Addo administration, which was about 8,000, obtained their financial clearance under the NDC administration in 2016 before he left power. And so now you know that the most crucial part of the recruitment process for public sector workers is financial clearance. Policemen, we reduced the police to population ratio from 1 policeman to 1,100 citizens to 1 policeman to under 800 citizens. It was because of the thousands of policemen we recruited. The same for fire service, all the security agencies. So the claim that we put a freeze on public sector recruitment is blatantly untrue. The other claim that they have recruited 750,000 public sector workers is also not true. Senna, the most authoritative source of information on government's work, expenditure, and activity is the budget statement. I indulge you to look at page 234. Sorry, 234 of the 2020 budget, Appendix 7. It actually gave a breakdown of all public sector workers. The total number of public sector workers in 2020, according to the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government's own budget statement, was 702,000. That is the totality of the strength of our public service, which means that in addition to what they came to inherit, and by the time they came to power, we had about 600,000 public sector workers. As of 2020, we had 702,000. Dr. Bawumia is claiming that in that 4 years, they recruited more public sector workers than what their own budget statement says is the total strength of our public and civil service. So right there, you know that he's peddling an untruth. It is not true. In fact, if you check page 242, the same Appendix 7 of the 2021 budget, the one read by Honorable Chairman Sabonsu, you will find that they hope to increase the size of our public service to 836,000 this year. That is if they are able to do additional recruitment. So they've made financial provision for that. And if you check that segment of the budget, they give a breakdown so that all the recruitments they make fall under ministries, departments, or agencies. So the point I'm making is that available government of Ghana figures show that Dr. Bawumia's claim is false. At most, they've done 100,000 public sector workers, which is not inconsistent with what had happened before they came to power. So that claim is also patently untrue. Now, I could go on and on and on and on, but perhaps your time may not permit me to do so.
I was just going to remind you.
Yes,
about that.
but another of the claims that cannot go unmentioned is a claim that they have fixed illegal mining, or they are fixing illegal mining. At a time when we know that the fight on Galamsey under the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government is the most disastrous public policy failure in the history of the Fourth Republic. This is the worst failure of public policy under the Fourth Republic. Because here was a president who, on his own volition, before prominent traditional rulers and other prominent figures in Ghanaian society, said that he would put his presidency on the line to fight Galamsey, which meant that if the fight failed, he was prepared to resign his position. All manner of noises were made about the fight. Masana, how did it end? It ended in calamitous fashion. Today, our major water bodies have been so badly polluted that the Ghana Water Company Limited, indeed only yesterday, the board chairman of the Ghana Water Company Limited, Alexander Afenyo-Martin, who incidentally happens to be deputy majority leader and a kingpin of the MPP, an MP for Ifutu, said that the Ghana Water Company will not be in a position to treat water for us to drink in the next 10 years because of the effects of Galamsey. And yet Dr. Bawumia says they are fixing it. Fixing what? Because recently they've sent some 200 soldiers to go and chase out those engaged in Galamsey. So now a whole president puts his presidency on the line, and yet the fight failed. And you have hope in these latest public relations gimmicks. At a time that we know that there was absolute governmental complicity in the Galamsey practice, where leading figures of that government, their relatives and associates, and leading members of the New Patriotic Party were actively involved in Galamsey. It is an open secret. Everybody knows this. So how do we take the vice president's claims that Galamsey is being fixed seriously? Today, it is not only the economy that is in shambles. Even Dumso. In the last week, there are many communities that have been sleeping in darkness for 12 hours. With this concomitant heat and other forms of inconvenience. And yet, this is a government that inherited far more electricity generation capacity than we needed. As I speak to you, we have an excess capacity of almost 1,200 megawatts that we can fall on any time. Yet, because of appalling incompetence, they were unable to invest significantly in transmission, because as you produce electricity, you need to upgrade and boost your transmission system so that they can transmit the power to ECG, for ECG to also distribute to our homes. They sat down for that to deteriorate, and they are telling us that that is what is causing the problem. In any event, even the so-called transmission projects that they are working on now, many of them will be bequeathed to them. Many of them are projects that we almost completed or started, that they should have at least completed in the last 5 years. They couldn't do it because of misplaced priorities, their belief in unbridled consumption, populist expenditure, as against investment in capital expenditure that will yield benefits for all of us. Okay. To make matters worse, they are not even able to admit that we are in doomsday. They say there's no doomsday, and yet people sleep in darkness for 12 hours. So it is not only our economy that is in shambles. Our power sector lies in tatters. Today, education. They hanker after populist policies. And the result is that today, when the GES puts out notification about reopening dates, it has 6 different reopening dates. total confusion and chaos within the education sector. Your child goes to school in the belief that school has reopened, only to be told that the date has been changed, so he has to come back home. Today, some children go to school for 3 weeks, come and stay home for 3 months. Others go for 6 weeks, come and stay home for 2 weeks. There's total confusion. What we have is an erratic, epileptic academic calendar. In fact, they can't even put out a reliable academic calendar. Just the administrative work of telling us that school will reopen this time and go on vacation this time, they cannot do it. Our education lies in ruins. So, if you put everything together, it boils down to the appalling incompetence of President Bawumia and his boss, Nana Akufo-Addo, who has completely remained quiet in these challenging times. He will speak about himself. He will not even give assurance about the economy. People's religious rights are trampled upon. He won't speak. Nothing concerns him. Meanwhile, this was a man who, when he was in opposition, you remember the group called Reggie and Bully, some 2 Ghanaians who were engaged in some entertainment show in the UK. When they won that competition, he actually sent them congratulatory messages. There is a man who will send messages of sympathy to France when the Notre Dame Cathedral burns down. And yet, in his own country, we are going through such economic hardships. We are sleeping in darkness. People's religious rights are being abused. And there is absolute stony silence. Nothing from him. No concern, no care, no empathy. 8 members of Ghanaian society, including a 14-year-old girl, are gunned down. And the president has remained mum. Not a word of sympathy. Not even any assurance that the perpetrators of that heinous crime will be brought to book. And yet what we have is hackneyed propaganda. The repetition of the same discredited propaganda that we have been subjected to all these years, which have not addressed the fundamental problems of the Ghanaian economy or the difficulties that Ghanaians face. So I solidarize with all Ghanaians who demand better governance, who demand an end to the spiraling cost of living, who demand an immediate cessation in the rampant increases in the price of goods and services. And what we expect is a government that will show responsiveness and whose responses must measure up to the challenges that we have, not one that is living in a delusional bubble, completely removed from the reality, and who thinks that if you can pay for electricity bills with Momo or mobile money, then the problem you have with even the cost of electricity or the cost of food is resolved. I think that Ghanaians deserve far better.
Okay.
But in conclusion, we as a citizenry must also come to appreciate that elections have consequences. When a government shows tendencies of insensitivity to your plight, you don't vote for that government again. And if we made it a point to hold governments to account and vote out non-performing governments and not be attracted to too much populism, we will have some of these difficulties. So as for the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government, they have been a veritable disaster. There is no redeeming quality about them. And what is worse is that given the responses that Dr. Bawumia has put out, and even what the finance minister said last week, Monday or so, as a Sunday, there is no light at the end of the tunnel. There's no silver lining at the edge of the cloud. And that the available facts and figures show that things are going to get worse. I will not be surprised if in the next pricing window, which is a few days away, fuel prices go up again because of the posture and the sheer amount of taxation that this government has slapped on fuel prices.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this.